Thank you, Leslie. How many of us can relate to that story? Let's give her another round of applause. So our fourth and final storyteller for tonight is Toya, who is not only very involved in our community, but the mother of 4. Toya and I met when she opened a artist studio on at Front Street called Rascal 7, where she had amazing artwork that she created from materials that other people consider trash. Beautiful, beautiful artwork. And that is only one of many things that Toya has created. And I am thrilled that you will all get to hear this fabulous story from a fabulous woman. So let's give a round of applause to Toya Webb. And then it happened. Did not happen. And then it happened 4 weeks earlier, and to my surprise, I was in labor. Now, I was completely prepared to have a home birth, and yet I was completely unprepared at the new language of love my heart would learn to speak. With this being my 3rd child, I knew the intense amount of pain that my body was getting ready to face, and I thought to myself excitedly, this is it. Bring it on. I woke my husband, and instantly he became the support, the very cheerleader I needed to maneuver through natural childbirth. His gentle and calm voice walked me in and out of every contraction. Babe, you've got this. Just relax. Breathe. You can do this. As the birth of our child drew closer, we woke our 2 older children up so they too, along with us, could welcome into the world our new little sugar. After an intense hour and a half of laboring and many insults cast at my midwife and my husband out of sheer desperation, she was here, and I held her and I cried. Because I chose to have a home birth, I didn't have an ultrasound. As a family, we would sit and anticipate whether or not this little baby was going to be a boy or a girl. That was part of the plan, it was part of the adventure, it was part of the excitement that we created as a family. While elbows and knees made their imprint on my belly, I would find myself wondering as this little pumpkin grew inside of me, is this babe going to be a little girl, my sweet, sweet little girl, that was ready and anxious to hold my hand as we maneuvered in and out and journeyed together on this mother and daughter relationship? Or was it my squirrely little boy ready to climb a bookshelf that he called a tower and to call himself my hero? That little man that would call himself my hero. Well, now it didn't matter because she was here and I held her and I cried. As my midwife finished the routine check of my babe, I saw that her voice and her face began to change. Her voice became quiet and she began to have a conversation with my mother-in-law. Now, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but instantly I knew that something was not right. As they studied her hands and her toes, her feet and her neck, my heart began to sink. I thought to myself, whispers are never good, as I calmly and with a panic asked my midwife, what's wrong? Why are you guys whispering? Not knowing I didn't know what was going on, and still at the same time, she was here. You can imagine my surprise as my midwife walked over to me and for the second time placed this little bundle into my arms. Now this child, being my 3rd child, she was the tiniest thing my eyes had ever seen. She was so delicate and so fragile. She had the skinniest arms and legs that I had ever held. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. She had the skinniest arms and legs that I had ever held. The darkest brown and most beautiful big eyes that I had ever seen, and in that moment they had captured my heart. She was gentle and she was mighty. Without saying a word, she had already said so much as her presence was made known to the world. My son, who was 5 at the time, he says it best, "Mom, she shot out like a firecracker." Her birth was ushered in with a roar of eagerness, excitement, anticipation. She was here. I held her and I cried. So you can imagine my surprise as the midwife walked over to me and handed me my little bundle for the second time and whispered to me in the most loving and nurturing voice, "Your child is special." I looked at my midwife and I sat quietly as tears began to fill my eyes. Again, she drew close to me and she said the words, "Your child is special." I tell you what, the way she said those words then made me feel the sense of honor and excitement to call this child mine. And yet I still didn't know what she meant, so I looked at her as the tears were now falling like rain, and I said, "What do you mean she's special?" She said 2 words that forever changed my life. Down syndrome. I could tell that she knew on the look of my face. I didn't know what it meant to have a child with Down syndrome. I didn't have a clue as to what Down syndrome was. And so she began to explain it to me. She too had a sister that was born with Downs, and she was full of grace, love, compassion, and she lacked prejudice. She went on to tell me that her sister and others that were born with this gift of Down syndrome were the closest and purest thing to God's love that we would ever be able to experience here on earth. As she began to talk, a whirlwind of emotion stirred inside of me. I went from being excited and ready to take this on to being angry, to being upset, to feeling fear and resentment. This was not part of the adventure. This was not part of the plan. I was not ready for this. You see, it was just a few weeks before that my husband and we were driving home. We had just left our friend's house. And our friends have 2 beautiful children who are brilliant, who are smart, and who are amazing. And they too are special. As we drove home, I remember turning to him and saying, "I can't imagine the amount of sacrifice and love it takes to care for someone that is considered to be so, so special." I told him that I didn't think that I was capable of loving that way. And yet she was here, and I held her, and I cried. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, and the months turned into years, my heart began to speak a new language of love. Now, this was a love that I didn't even know existed, that was buried deep down in an untapped reservoir of who I am. And it was a love that only Callie could touch. Now, this love had me day in and day out on my hands and my knees, moving my daughter's arms and knees in proper motion so that one day she would learn to crawl, to stand, and then to walk. This was a love that dedicated myself to teaching my daughter sign language so that she could exist in language to the world instead of screams. I found this love to be so fierce, to be so mighty, to be so powerful, that it held me together when I felt like I was going to crumble. When I would raise my hands and yell to the very God that created life, that gave me this gift, "I cannot do this. Why me? Why me?" she could feel the very vibrations of my words and she could learn to speak. This is a love that as time went on realized Callie was speaking into my hands. The very vibration of who she is, her very being, her love for me changed me. I'll never forget the day Callie was 4 and she looked at me with the darkest, most beautiful brown eyes I had ever seen. And she said the words, "Mama, I love you." And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, we have waited for this. It has taken so much and she has done it. She has found the courage and the boldness to put those 4 words together and to speak. We celebrated with high fives, with hugs, and with kisses. And in that moment, I too realized, as I looked at my beautiful girl, that I had done it. It had taken everything inside of me. I tell you what, it has taken everything inside of me, and I have done it. And we celebrated as she held me and I held her, and then I began to cry.